Welcome to the White House. Whose first time is it at the White House today? Raise your hand. Awesome. Nice, nice. And hello to everyone watching via the live stream. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jason Tanko. I'm a senior advisor with the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I lead our community engagement and youth outreach. On behalf of the initiative, the Office of Public Engagement here at the White House, we wanted to welcome you to our White House AAPI Youth Forum with the East Coast Asian American Student Union. So we have a really, really incredible agenda for you all today, and it's really built around the theme, educate, engage, empower. This morning, through the speakers and their TED Talks, we're hoping they will help educate you all about the issues that affect the AAPI community, including around mental health, education, DACA, and pathways to public service. Through our workshops later, we hope to highlight opportunities for you all to get engaged around these issues. And finally, during our regional breakouts, we're hoping that we give you all the tools, resources, the knowledge necessary to empower you to take action within your campuses and communities. So you'll hear a lot of us talking today about the four sort of issues and then the 3 E's. So I hope you all don't get tired of those terms. But before we introduce our keynote speakers, I wanted to first plug our social media. So how many of you all are on Twitter? Raise your hand. Awesome. How many of you all are on Instagram? How many of you all are on both? All right, hashtag bonus points for you all. Well, AAPI and ICASU are on both Instagram and Twitter, so please tweet and Instagram us at White House AAPI, at ICASU, and then using the hashtag AAPIYF14. And we actually have this awesome Instagram frame, so hopefully you all had a chance to take a picture with it earlier, and our lovely models over here are going to demonstrate the Instagram frame. So did you all want to give them an example of how to use the frame? Awesome, awesome. Do you all want to be in it too? Yeah? Okay, so why don't we take a picture of the audience? Yeah. All right, can you get everyone?
It's ultra wide. All you guys are in it. Smile.
All right, I'm gonna take a panorama too. So I'm gonna take a panoramic picture too, posted on Facebook and Instagram. So hopefully you all can retweet us. So with that, to open things up, I wanted to introduce my colleagues from the Office of Public Engagement. So Kyle Learman is an Associate Director of Public Engagement here at the White House, and he leads outreach to young Americans. So with that, Kyle.
Hey everyone, great to see you all today. As Jason mentioned, I'm the President's Liaison to Young Americans in the Office of Public Engagement, and it's really exciting to see you all here today. I just wanted to quickly kind of introduce myself and then also just talk very briefly about a couple of issues that really affect young people across the country that we're trying to work on every day here, but that frankly we need all of your help with as well. The first thing I'll just say is that to be the youth liaison, you got to be a young guy, so I'm 27 here. And the Office of Public Engagement has kind of 2 jobs. One is to be your advocate inside this building. So we're your voice, whether it's in policy discussions or making sure that your voices are heard on a number of policy areas here at the White House. But then also, it's our job to make sure that you guys know about the President's priorities and that we're working with you to organize around those priorities across the country. So, it's really exciting to have you guys here so that we can hear directly from you. I've been working for the President in one capacity or another for a long time. I started kind of on this journey when I was 21 years old. I was a student at George Washington University. I know many of you are college students here today. And literally kind of picked up after he gave his victory speech in Iowa on January 3rd, 2008, and I drove down to Charleston, South Carolina to volunteer, walking in the Charleston office at about 1 a.m. And I got there and I was like hooked immediately. Then Senator Obama came and spoke at the College of Charleston 3 days later, and I ended up taking a year off of college, getting hired by the campaign and working in South Carolina, in Maryland, in Texas, in Pennsylvania, in Kentucky, and in Virginia. Then I had the privilege of working on the transition team after that, all at kind of while I was a college student. And it was incredibly exciting to just see young people across the country getting engaged with a campaign like that, and so excited to help push Barack Obama across the finish line. And we've never forgotten that. I mean, the president thinks about young people every day and wants to make sure your voices are heard here inside the White House. And the reason I kind of tell you that story is because you guys are ahead of the curve. You know, I'm glad that I went down there and I worked on that campaign at a young age, but our policies, the policies that we make here at the White House and Congress, at the state and local level, they're not going to affect anyone more than your generation. So you guys need to be more involved than anyone else. You need to make sure you're louder than anyone else. Make sure that your voices are being heard as much as possible. So then I just want to talk about a couple issues that we're working on and that I hope you guys can be a part of when it comes to the president's priorities and the vice president's priorities and our administration's priorities. The first of which is college affordability. You guys might know that the president and the first lady were actually paying back their student loans until not too long ago. So they really understand what it means when it comes to kind of the financial burden of college costs. The First Lady has been doing a ton of work to make sure that young people understand the benefits of going to college, of reaching higher, and making sure that you folks understand how to get student loans and the information they need to get to college. And the president and we've all been working on how to keep those college costs down. So late last August, the president did a bus tour up in the Northeast where he talked about a couple things. One was creating a rating system of colleges to make sure that we understand what value we can be getting out of colleges and what students are taking away from that, and making sure that we're paying for value when it comes to college. The other thing that he did was challenge states and colleges themselves to make sure that they were keeping costs down, and that's something that you guys can really be a big part of. As folks that are in school, you guys can kind of demand action from your state and from your state level, from your state legislators, and also from your college and university presidents and your administrations. You guys should be organizing on campus around those issues, and we're working with a coalition of student groups that will make sure that this group is plugged in with afterwards on that issue so that we're working together moving forward on that. The other thing the president has done is understanding that a lot of folks are graduating with a significant amount of debt, is figuring out ways to make that easier to pay back. So just a few weeks ago, the president endorsed legislation that Senator Elizabeth Warren's put forth that would allow students to refinance their student loans at lower rates. So we're going to push in Congress as hard as we can to get that done. But in the meantime, when Congress isn't acting, the other thing that we're doing is taking executive actions to see what we can do to make things easier. So the president put forth a presidential memorandum that expands a program called Pay As You Earn. Has anyone ever heard of Pay As You Earn? Okay, good. This is a really great program, especially for folks who are going to work at nonprofits or in public service. What it does is allows you to cap your loan payments at 10% of your income when you're starting to pay them back, saving folks hundreds of dollars a month and making those payments much more manageable. So check that out. It's a really important and useful tool as well. The third thing, and Tina might talk about this a little bit because I've been working closely with her on it, is one of the things we really heard, frankly, from students across the country as an issue that was incredibly important to them and something that they wanted to work on is really there's been a campus sexual assault. It's been happening across the country, and we've been seeing more and more about it. So back last February, the president put together a campus sexual assault task force that focused the administration on how can we work together across the administration with schools, with universities, on preventing as many sexual assaults as we can, and also dealing with them in a better and more appropriate way after they happen. So I'll let Tina talk a little bit about that, but one thing I just want to mention for you guys to keep an eye out for is that we're putting together a new campaign that we're going to be launching in the fall that is really focused on empowering everyone in this room. We want to give you guys the tools you need to organize on campus to step up and stop sexual assault before it happens. So keep an eye out for that. It's something that we're going to need your all's leadership on campus, and we're going to be organizing in a big way across the country on that. So thanks so much for being here today. It's exciting to see how energized and engaged you guys are, and thanks to Jason and Gautam for letting me come speak. Take care, guys.
Thank you again, Kyle. So next up, I'd like to introduce my colleague here at the Office of Public Engagement, Gautam Raghavan, who's our liaison to the AAPI community and LGBT community at OPE. Gautam.
Hey everybody, I apologize for not having my jacket. It's been one of those mornings where we're running around a little bit crazy, which is like so many mornings here. But welcome to the White House. It's great to see you. First, let me just say congratulations for being here. It is so great that you've all taken a day out of your summer to spend time with us and with each other and organize around all these incredibly important issues. I've had the privilege of being here for a couple of years. I think this is the third or fourth time, third? Something like that we've had all of you here or different variations of you. And it's because we believe so strongly about the importance of engaging you and making sure that you have the tools, the resources, the information, the networks you need to go back to your communities and help organize people. So I want to be really brief, and I just want to ask you to do two things because I hate to be in front of a group of people without asking them to do something. So here are the two things. The first is to always be thinking about today, and also when you go back to your campuses and communities, about ways in which we can be working in coalition. And I mean that in two ways. So first, within our AAPI community. Our strength, but also sometimes our weakness as a community is that we're so diverse. We have so many different people in the big AAPI tent. And I think we always need to be thinking about how are we being inclusive, how are we thinking about issues that affect all of us, and how are we thinking about also how do we work outside of the AAPI community? What are the other communities that we can work with? As Jason mentioned, I also direct our outreach to the LGBT community. So I'm always thinking about what are the issues that different communities have in common. And that's how we're going to be the most effective. So I'd encourage all of you to really think about how do we sort of widen the networks that we're working with. And the second thing, which I know is a theme throughout the entire day, and Kyle spoke about it as well, is to just really encourage all of you to consider government service. Because one of my favorite quotes is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Get it? All right, take a moment. You got it? Okay. And I drive that home because it's so important that we have members of our community in the rooms when decisions are being made. If you look at so many of the places we've been able to make progress over the last 5 years, it's because we've had AAPIs involved, and they've been able to say, this is important to my community, this is my family's story. So whether it's senior members of the president's staff like Tina, or it's staff assistants or researchers or speechwriters across the administration, they're really making a difference. So I would encourage all of you to think about the White House internship program. And then if you've graduated or if you're about to graduate, think about government service. Go to USA Jobs. You can reach out to the initiative. They know how to plug you in. And I know some of you are going to be doing a workshop on this later today. So really, please think about it. It's not like Scandal or House of Cards. You're not going to die. And there's not that much like backstabbing. But it is a lot of fun. And we get to see so much change and so much difference that we get to make here. So thank you for being here. Congratulations. And I hope you have a great day.
All right, thanks again, Gautam. So I'm really excited to announce our keynote speaker for this morning. The next speaker is the Assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to the First Lady. What an awesome, cool job. How many of you all would die to be the Chief of Staff to the First Lady? Right? She's also the current Executive Director for the Council on Women and Girls, and she's the former Executive Director of the Office of Public Engagement here at the White House. Tina is just such a staunch advocate for the AAPI community, and she was really instrumental in helping us reauthorize the White House initiative on AAPIs in the president's first year in office. She's really a fearless leader here at the White House, but also really just a really great role model for young AAPIs. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tina Chen.
Well, thank you, Jason. This is, it's a great way to start the day. So with an introduction like that, and welcome to the White House. Good morning. It is, great to see you all here. As Gautam said, it is terrific for all of you to take time out of your summer and a whole day. I've seen the agenda. You've got like a really busy agenda ahead of you today. But it is terrific and important for you to be both learning about these issues, investing the time and the energy in getting involved, and then most importantly, when you leave here, really using the knowledge and the skills that you're going to learn today back in your communities to really spread the word and to be leaders and be leaders yourself. So we are delighted that you're here. We are very grateful that you're here because work doesn't really happen, and the president says it often now, change doesn't actually really happen in Washington or from the top. It really happens out in communities and out in the grassroots, which is something he knows and lives by and has lived by as a community organizer his whole life. It's been, just a tremendous honor to be here at the White House, like in a little bit into my background, which is a little bit different than some of the other folks that you'll hear from today. But it's just been such a treat to be part of an administration that really understands our community in ways in which really none other has. I often describe the president as saying, he really understands our community, in part because he's actually spent more time in his life in an Asian country than I have. As someone who was raised in Indonesia and part of an Asian family, he's done that. I've really only visited China a couple times. So he really does, in a very core way, I think, understand the Asian community well and is committed to us. And you can see it in, the many things that he has done, from really being committed early on to revitalizing and reinvigorating the White House initiative on AAPIs, and not just signing a new executive order to put that back in place, but to really, empower Kieran, Jason, the staff there, everyone, to really do a tremendous amount of outreach, to have great community leaders who are part of the commission, and to hear from people about the issues that are coming up, in communities that we need to address. So, for example, it always sticks in my mind, when the BP oil spill happened. And there's a lot of work being done by the administration to deal with the oil spill and to deal with what's going on in communities down there. What the commission pointed out was, what otherwise I think wouldn't have been known, is that there was a community of Vietnamese fishermen who were really impacted by the oil spill, who had language barriers to being able to access the government, and other, supports that were being made available to people affected. And the initiative was really instrumental in being able to send language proficient, folks into the areas to really do outreach into those communities, to set up special centers and ways in which we could help that community. They've done tremendous work together with the Department of Labor on nail salon workers. We've done incredible work as we did ACA outreach around the Affordable Care Act, and into our community in languages that could be understood by folks, to make sure that people understood the need to sign up. And and the fact that, to explain to people, what it meant to be eligible for health insurance and affordable care and what to do with it. And to make sure that within the Affordable Care Act's structure itself, that we have mechanisms that deal with and address health disparities, that we have research, and that we require data and we require understanding as we move forward in healthcare treatment, that it isn't just the model white male patient that has typically been the subject of medical research, and that all of our treatments and medications are based upon, and that we actually have the data that really is based upon what all of us look like, the diversity of Americans, both by way of gender and by way of race. So those have been just important ways in which I think this administration understands, the need to reach specifically into communities. And we've had great appointments. I mean, this president has, as a lawyer, when I came, we came into office, there were, you could count them on about one hand, and maybe plus a couple of fingers, the number of Asian American judges on the federal bench in this country. Unbelievable in the 21st century that's what the numbers would be. And we have, just made tremendous strides in the appellate courts at all levels of the federal courts in increasing the number of AAPI judges, in across the country where there's just never been any at all. You've had, great cabinet members. We've had I think you've been hearing from Chris Liu. We have Todd Park, who is our, chief technology officer here. It's been just, a wonderful, diverse group of leaders that have been part of the administration that I'm really so proud to be here with. And I will say it's not anything I ever imagined doing. So in contrast to what I think Kyle and Gautam were saying about get into public service young, as they did, I did not. I mean, I did 23 years as a private sector lawyer before coming here at Skadden Arps as a partner and doing corporate litigation. So coming to the White House wasn't really anything I ever thought I'd do in my, 50s, and move my family and come here for the first time. So it's been a tremendous honor to do that. But I did say, if you choose to go into the private sector, if that's a pathway you take, which is what I did, what I did always do is stay involved in my community. So I did a lot of pro bono work as a lawyer. I did a lot of work with not-for-profit boards and activities supporting women's issues, which have been a passion of mine, and the Chinese American Service League in the Chinatown in Chicago, in other, the Chicago Library Commission, hospital board, where actually I worked with Valerie Jarrett and someone named Michelle Obama. It's, being that involved, I would urge you to be involved with whatever your passion is in the work that you do. Because it is by doing that, you can sometimes get that in your day job. You can sometimes also get that in a day job that you also find tremendously fulfilling in the private sector, and with this other work that keeps you involved. Because those are the ways in which you can be connected to folks, the ways in which you can make change, the ways in which you find just tremendously personally fulfilling, which is what it's been for me. I'm the daughter of Chinese immigrants. My parents came over from China in 1949. This is not something they ever imagined either, and I think about them often. They've both passed away by many years, but the things that I've been able to do in the last 5.5 years are things they would never have imagined, and quite frankly, can only happen in this country, where, in one generation, you can take the daughter of two people who arrived here as young, just having graduated from college, students, from China. Their families all still back in China. They come literally with the suitcases they can carry in their hands to the United States, is what they started out with. Knowing no one, they had no connections to anybody. They made their way with, as grad students, and then to make careers for themselves, and my mom stayed home to raise my sister and I, and, we just kind of had a American dream middle-class life in Cleveland, Ohio, trying to make their way through and, wind up sending, their daughters to college, and would never have imagined, that over the course of that time, that next generation, that their daughter would someday, as I was able to do this past March when I accompanied the First Lady on our trip to China that we made, that, their daughter would step off a plane, in China, would have the opportunity to sit down and meet, with the First Lady of China, Madame Peng, and sit at a private dinner with her in one of the Dayutai guest house, which is the sort of Camp David equivalent, in Beijing, and really do so on a plane, that's blue and white and emblazoned with the words United States of America across the side. And I have to say, when I stepped off the plane, when we landed in Beijing, and on the tarmac, to look back at that and realize this full circle that my family's life had taken. You really both, a tremendous just sort of emotion around my family and the courage that it took for my parents to make that journey on their own, from China to the United States in the 40s, for their perseverance, but then also, that tremendous pride you feel in our country, in a country that provides that kind of openness and opportunity, the chance, if you work hard, that you can succeed, that your children can succeed, that you can make a better life for the next generation, and also the obligation, I think, that so many of us feel to do that, which is one of our country's strengths. One of the things that allows our country to keep growing, to be what it is right now, the best place in the world for businesses to invest, the best place for, I think, individuals to succeed, is both that openness, which is why immigration reform is so important for us to continue to work on. It is the innovation and the creativity of our people, and our young people in particular, which is why all of the President's initiatives that Kyle talked about, making sure that our education system remains open and high quality and affordable and accessible to everyone, are so critical. And, it is the, just sort of acceptance and quality of opportunity that everyone is afforded, which is why the strides that this administration has made on LGBT equality, on making sure women have every opportunity that they have, are so important and so critical to really realizing and continuing and pursuing those dreams. And I'll just close by saying, as you've heard other people say up here, and why you're here today, is that you're really important to making all of those things happen. We are kind of laying the seeds, I think, for what this next evolution of our country's progress can be, which is an America that is even more inclusive, that is even more creative and innovative, that even provides even more opportunities for people in this country and people around the world to realize their dreams. And you are the ones who are going to carry that forward. You're the ones who are going to take the foundation that got laid through this administration and really make so much of what we've only been able to take the first step on really come to fruition. So today's your first step in learning about those things and learning about the skills that can take you forward. So enjoy your day. We are, as I said before, so grateful that you've taken the time to be here. But now really watching. I'm going to be watching you on after you leave and what you're going to do. So, and I know these guys are going to stay in touch with you throughout. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks again, Tina. Next time the First Lady takes a trip to Asia, if you ever need help staffing her, just let me know. Okay, great. So before I introduce our next four inspiring speakers, I actually have some pretty exciting news to announce. So as many of you know, last summer AAPI launched the Healthy Engaged Youth program. How many of you all have heard of the HEY program or were former ambassadors? Raise your hand. Awesome, awesome. So, dozens of AAPI young leaders came together, like yourselves. They signed up to become HEY ambassadors, and they conducted outreach around the Affordable Care Act and the changes that were happening around the ACA in their campuses and communities. So you all should be happy to know, and you are literally the first to find out about this. But soon, young leaders like yourself, between the ages of 18 to 30 years old, are invited to submit your plans to increase awareness around the four focus issue areas, which again are education, mental health, pathways to public service, and DACA. And the name of our program this year is called, drumroll please, E3, which as you all know stands for Educate, Engage, and Empower. So I told you all not to get tired of E3 yet, right? So this challenge for you all will be hosted on a website called challenge.gov, which is a portal for the federal government to post challenges that seek innovative solutions from the public to help us solve those issues. So the E3 Ambassadors Program will afford young leaders like yourself the opportunity to brainstorm and implement your own unique ideas to help us improve the overall quality of life for AAPIs across the country. So whether it's tabling at a community or campus fair, hosting a workshop at ICASU, MASU, whatever conferences, utilizing social media, coming up with viral hashtags. I know you all are good at that. So doing flash mobs on your campus or communities, whatever it is, we really want to hear your ideas to increase outreach and awareness around those four issues. So we're looking for plans that do a couple things. So one, that highlight your interest and why you're qualified to address those four issues. Two, that include measurable goals and benchmarks. Three, that demonstrate the use of marketing techniques like social media, traditional media. And four, provide a foundation for future young leaders like yourself to build off of. So the, quote, prizes for our youth challenge are up to 150 E3 applicants will be selected. So up to 150, that's 15 per federal region. So if you all refer to your regional maps, you all are spread out throughout the country in our 10 federal regions. So those folks will serve as ambassadors from September 1st through May 31st, 2015. So there's the timeline. If you go back to the prizes really quickly, The E3 ambassadors we're hoping to announce in a blog in August 2014. They'll convene, pending available funding, in Washington, D.C. to be trained and to hear from administration speakers, so it'll be kind of like a reunion of today. They'll receive a congratulatory letter from the AAPI Executive Director, Kiran Ahuja, and you'll also have the chance to work collaboratively with AAPI staff, members of our President's Advisory Commission on AAPIs, our regional interagency working group members, and other administration officials. So those are some of the prizes of the challenge. In terms of the timeline and sort of commitments, we're launching the program here at the Youth Forum today. Our application deadline is a month from today, so August 17th. And we also timed basically the outreach around these issues for a number of reasons. So we'll have calls every other month to sort of lay out the issues and to talk about the opportunities for you all to engage your campuses and communities. So from September through October 2014, E3 ambassadors will focus on education. So that's meant to coincide with, back to school events as you reach out to students, your communities going back to school, to be able to reach out to them around issues that Kyle Gautam talked about: college affordability, anti-bullying. How many of you all know what AAPIs stand for? All right, so you hear later from Diana about what AAPIs are. So issues like that is what the focus will be on from September through October. From November through December, the E3 ambassadors will focus on mental health. So how many of you all know someone personally who might be, affected by mental health, or you're interested in destigmatizing mental health within the AAPI community? Raise your hand. Wow, that's pretty much everyone. So from November through December, E3 ambassadors will focus on mental health, and that'll coincide with the next ACA enrollment period, which starts on, does anyone know? November 15th. So that's why E3 ambassadors will focus on mental health during that period, because of the benefits of the ACA with mental health, which you'll hear from Juliet later on. From January through February, the E3 ambassadors will focus on pathways to public service. So how many of you all are interested in a job or internship in the federal government, or know someone who might be interested in a job or internship, right? So January, February, that's usually around the time when a lot of applications are due for the summer, for internships, for jobs and everything. So our E3 ambassadors will help push out those announcements to their campuses and communities. And so folks can start applying and taking advantage of those opportunities. And finally, from March through April, E3 ambassadors will focus on DACA. So how many of you all know someone who's undocumented or eligible for DACA? Great. Well, hopefully they've taken advantage of this great program, which Maria will talk about later. So that's the timeline, and the E3 ambassadors will convene in May 2015 here in Washington, D.C. for AAPI Heritage Month. We'll reflect back on the year, talk about next steps, and you'll also graduate from the E3 Ambassadors Program. So just because we have that timeline doesn't mean that the E3 ambassadors are limited to those periods. Those are just the focus periods. You all can definitely do all 4 of those issues throughout the year, but we want all of the E3 ambassadors to kind of focus on those periods during their time as E3 ambassadors. So final question for you all, just based on that presentation. How many of you all would apply for the E3 Ambassadors Program or might know someone who might be interested in the program? Raise your hands. All right, good. Well, hopefully all of you at home are raising your hands too. We're really excited about this new program, the E3 Ambassadors Program. We'll talk about it throughout the day. And if I haven't convinced you about the program and its benefits, then these next 4 speakers definitely will. So to kick off our series of TED Talks, where each speaker will have about 10 minutes to talk about their personal stories and educate you about their respective issues. First off, I wanted to invite someone who's personally inspiring, not only to me and AAPI staff and the other folks that she's worked with, but also the countless students that she's taught and mentored. So with that, I'd like to introduce Diana Yu. She's an education program specialist with the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. So let's kick it off, Diana.
Good morning. Can you see me? Am I tall enough? Okay. So thank you all so much for being here and for inviting me. I'm especially honored to be here with this exciting youth forum and to just feel the energy that you bring to DC here, because I know some of you have traveled from afar. And so as the next generation of AAPI leaders, you really are the embodiment of how essential education is to the growth and development of our community. Really, as I look at you, I kind of feel sorry for my son, who's 2 years old, because I'm going to compare him to you from now on. And remember, all these youth who are so forward-thinking and who spent a beautiful summer day instead of going to the beach or sleeping in, or you could have been anywhere else, but you're here to really learn about other ways that you can empower not only yourselves, but our community and your generation. And so I'm confident that our future is in great hands with you. So who am I and why am I here? As Jason mentioned, my name is Diana Yu, and I do work at the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. I feel like my life was a little bit rigged because my mom was a teacher and my dad was a civil servant, so they got married, and then voila, I'm an educator and a civil servant as well. But just to give you a little bit more information about me, I immigrated here from Korea when I was really young, and my parents came here to give me a better educational opportunity. They really sacrificed a lot because they had a lot going for them in Korea, but they really wanted me to live beyond what they had and do more than they did. And so I worked really hard, actually. I wouldn't say I was a perfect child, but I really worked hard to live out that model minority myth that people talk about. And I really thought that that was my way of showing gratitude to my parents for making such a huge sacrifice. And so I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I'm not embarrassed about that. And if some of you are feeling me out there, then you know what that means. And if you aren't, that's okay too. I also was a special education teacher for several years. And so, I worked with youth with different disabilities and ailments, with emotional disabilities, with other challenges. Some didn't even need to be in my classroom, but they were there. And, it was working really hard to get them out of that and to really empower them, right? E3, empower, engage, and educate. Empower them to get out beyond, what the world was telling them they were, or in this category, or in this classroom. And so I certainly, understand the full spectrum. And so, sorry, a little bit nervous. I'm not very good at these things, so. But so I do understand, and I'm just really, I personally am inspired that you're here. And I think that this will probably be more of a life-changing and learning opportunity for me, especially during the breakout session when I can hear from you and listen to your thoughts on how to change how we deliver our services in terms of education for our community. And so enough about me, because that's not why you're here. I do want to share with you, in terms of education for our community, while there's so many different topics that we can cover, this program specifically is focused on 3 topics, which Jason mentioned earlier. AAPIs is one, college affordability is another, and bullying prevention is the last. And so I know Jason asked, but I didn't get to see. How many of you are familiar with AAPIs? Okay, great. And how many of you attend one now or have attended an AAPI? No one. Well, just so that we're all on the same playing field, we're going to show you a video to give you a little bit more information on AAPIs.
Now, in the end, that's what this is all about, giving our kids the best possible shot at life, equipping them with the skills, education that a 21st century economy demands, giving them every chance to go as far as their hard work and God-given potential will take them. That's not just going to make sure that they do well, that will strengthen our economy and our country for all of us.
So everyone knows what an AAPIs is now, right? But just to review, AAPIs stand for Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander Serving Institutions. They have to have at least 10% AAPI, student population of at least 10% AAPIs, and also 50% of students needing financial aid. And so you can't just be an AAPIs because you think you are one, you have to apply to the Department of Education. So here comes the engagement part. What can you do? If you think that the school that you're attending may be eligible or should be eligible and it's not one, and certainly you can check on the department's website to see if it is one, then you should engage your administrators. Ask them the question. Say, how come we aren't AAPIs designated? And it's more money, right? Everyone always talks about we need more money for programs, we need more money for our students, and this is money that could be for you. And so that's step one you could do. Number two, you can share your stories and the importance of AAPIs via social media. And so the initiative started a campaign, hashtag AAPIs Stories, and so you can certainly go on Twitter and check out the pictures and stories that people have already shared, but share your own as well because they're very important to get the word out. And thirdly, if you are at an AAPIs or you're going to try to get your school eligible to be an AAPIs, we encourage you to build connections with and between AAPIs. I know you've probably heard the mantra, work hard in life or work harder. But really, I want to smash that mantra and say it's not important to work hard. It's important to work smarter and not harder, right? So if you can learn from the mistakes or lessons learned from other people, why not do that? And also, there's power in the numbers, right? Power's in the masses. So if you want to start any movements or new initiatives, you can work with other AAPIs students. And so certainly, we encourage you to build those connections. Secondly, we want to talk about college affordability, and I know Kyle spoke a lot about that earlier, so I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but as you think about your education, I think the reality is that at the end of graduation, there's that stark realization that and pressure to think about budgeting to pay off your school loans. And I don't know how many of you are there because I think a lot of you are still in school. But for me, when I finished school, and I'm still actually in school because this is my third degree, and then I married someone who went to medical school, so compound that by like 3-4 times, right? And I was like, oh my God, I'm marrying someone and getting into more debt. But then this administration really took this issue to heart, and they as Kyle mentioned, capped pay as you go and have different programs for loan forgiveness. And so, I mean, I know it sounds really cliche, but now I have some hope because my initial payment was out of this, like an entire paycheck. It was a four-figure payment monthly, really unaffordable. But now we pay like really easy payments, 3 figures. Still a lot, but at least we can buy diapers for my child and we can have food on the table. They really take that into consideration, and so there's hope for you. So that's one thing that I would add, and that's all thanks to the Bipartisan Student Loan Certainty Act. And so you can find out more, again, on our website, and Kyle spoke more about those pieces, so I won't belabor that point. Oops, sorry. And lastly, bullying prevention. So I know, I think it was Kyle or Tina who spoke about sexual harassment, but also bullying, just mitigating that from the beginning. Attending a school at a safe environment, that's an entitlement. You should be at school where it's safe. Now, as a special education teacher, I knew that I was really limited in as much as I could prevent. If I saw it happening, I could stop it, right? But it was really hard to stop it before it happened. And or those kids who were getting bullied on the sly, when you like pass a note to the kid next to you, or you like say a comment that it's gonna really get to them. I couldn't catch all of that. And that's where all of you can help and get involved. You can be a mentor, right, in your community or to a local center. You can check out online resources at stopbullying.gov or check out the initiative's New York Regional Interagency Working Group Google Hangout on anti-bullying. And lastly, you can also refer youth to hotlines like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and counselors and other resources, right? So they say that 54% of AAPI students that are 12 to 18 report being bullying inside the classroom. But the teachers couldn't stop that. And you think it's the teacher's fault, but a lot of this is going on even while you're supervising. There's a lot of like off the cuff stuff, right? Words you don't know about, words that teachers don't know about, trending things or things that are going on Twitter. There's a lot of social bullying too now, right? So that was just a quick overview on some of the educational topics. We really need all of you to help amplify not only this news, but to get involved because we certainly can't do everything on our own. So I encourage you to think of questions and thoughts you'd like to discuss for the breakout session later because I'll be there. And you can also read more about these educational topics in the Ed Toolkit that the initiative staff has prepared for you. So thank you so much.